writing. So you want to aim to structure your paragraphs thematically, okay? Each paragraph should be a unique way of proving your thesis. Now, some people like to do it through like the plot, like this is what happens in the beginning of the book. This is what happens next. This is what happens next. I am kind of not in favor of that. I'm very biased toward this. Aligning each body paragraph with a theme. Okay, if it's a character analysis, meaning the question's asking you about a specific character or specific characters, do a paragraph on each character, okay, and what they represent and what they convey and what ideas are being conveyed through them. But that's if it's specifically on a character analysis. Apart from that, I would answer it thematically and look at different themes, okay? Okay, so your argument should reflect your opinion of the text. I hope you guys can kind of see now how important personal voice is. How important having your own opinion of the text is, because it's coming up everywhere, isn't it? You should consider the ideas that interest you most in the text. You should consider purpose and context. Again, that's that idea about critical analysis, right? So everything's kind of combining, worlds are colliding. Okay, you want to think about your personal reaction to the text. Did you have an emotional reaction? Can you summarize it in a sentence? Okay, these are the things you want to talk about in your essay. So, these are kind of different samples of that, and what this is kind of like a nice activity. This will help you in your essay writing. This is something that you could literally kind of use in your essay when you do this. But this is a nice activity to do for after you study a text. Literally this. Write down what your text audience effect is on you, what the text taught you. So, Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen, for example, the practice of reading is portrayed throughout Northanger Abbey as a means of personal development and instruction, though not one without its flaws, okay? And list different audience effects, different things that the text can teach you. Why? Why would you want to do this? Well, because one, it helps strengthen your own ideas about the text, but also these can become theses. Yes, okay? These can become your thesis for an essay. If you're asked about the practice of reading, well, there you go. You have one straight away. You have a thesis ready to go. Okay? So, I've looked at Jane Eyre and The Handmaid's Tale. These are two different texts that a lot of people study in Year 11, so I thought those would probably be the most beneficial to look at. This is basically a sample like essay structure that follows this theme. This structure. So, most people do 3 body paragraphs. Some people do 4 body paragraphs. Completely up to you. So let's say you look at The Handmaid's Tale. Your first theme is on the relationship between state and individual bodies. The second theme is on complicity. The third theme is on the power of storytelling, and then your conclusion. For Jane Eyre, your first theme can be on conformity as a stifling self-discovery and growth. Theme 2 can be on the conflict between love and autonomy. And then theme 3 can be on the social classes. And then your conclusion, okay? Sample essay structure. Now, the biggest thing another big thing, there's a lot of big things we've covered, but another big thing that you want to have in your essays is a through line, okay? And I know I've mentioned this in my January prelim lecture as well earlier this year, and my apologies if you've heard me say this before, but to recap, and for those who haven't heard it before, in your writing you want to have a through line. So what that means, the example I always use, and you're probably going to hear me say this a whole bunch more if you come to my lecture series, because this is something that we continuously need to know. Let's say I got asked a question. This is going to be really random, but let's say my essay question, I sat down in prelims and the essay question was, is ice cream yummy? Okay, just bear with me, okay? I know this is random, bear with me. Or let's say the question, it's a statement. Ice cream is yummy. Do you agree or disagree? Let's say I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, yeah, ice cream is yummy. I do like ice cream. And I need to develop an argument, right? A thesis. Well, my thesis is ice cream is in fact yummy. Body paragraph 1 is going to look at chocolate ice cream and say, yeah, chocolate ice cream is yummy. Body paragraph 2 is going to be on vanilla ice cream and say vanilla ice cream is yummy. Body paragraph 3 is going to be on mint ice cream and say, yeah, mint ice cream is yummy. And I'm kind of using each flavor to prove my argument. Bear with me. I know this is weird, but bear with me. Can you see how even though the question didn't ask about chocolate ice cream or what else did I say? Vanilla ice cream, I think, and mint ice cream, it wasn't asking about those specific flavors. Can you see how they still relate to my idea and how they're still kind of like sub points of my overarching thesis, which is ice cream is yummy? Okay. That's because I have a through line. The through line is that ice cream is yummy, right? That's my thesis. I'm proving it's relevant to all my arguments. That sounds really obvious. You're probably thinking, duh, Chloe, like, duh, isn't that obvious? No. Okay, that's something that I give feedback on a lot because it might sound really obvious, but when you have really complex ideas like we see in front of us here, they become harder to string together. In that example I just gave about ice cream, you can say, all right, you can see how vanilla ice cream and mint ice cream link together. Those separate arguments, separate body paragraphs, but they still link together. How does the relationship between state and individual bodies and the power of storytelling link together? Can you see how that might be a little bit more tricky to link? We need a through line, okay? And it becomes especially difficult in exams because what often happens in exams is students sit down and they look at the question and they go, oh my gosh, okay, I need to have 3 arguments that link together, that link to this question here. All right, this argument I know, this argument I could use, this argument I could use. And they kind of have these 3 distinct arguments. And then they forget to link those 3 arguments together, or 4 arguments, depending on how many you write. 4 arguments, 3 arguments together. Okay, so remember, and that has to be your thesis. Your through line is your thesis. It needs to be linked all throughout. Please remember that. Okay, so a good intro follows this kind of structure. Again, as we know, I'm hesitant about saying structure because I don't want it to be blocky, but a good intro does these couple of things. Firstly, your thesis is your first sentence, okay? That we can be sure about. It's only one sentence, remember. So you need to provide a clear thesis that's a response to the question and is that through line. You need to introduce your text, so you need to say who your composer is, what your text is, so the form of it. Is it a novel? Is it a play? Whatever. Not to be confused with the macro techniques, okay? Form can also mean, is it a novel, play, film, whatever. The date that the text was published, its key contextual factors, so you can go off and talk about them in greater depth later on in your individual arguments. Also, only talk about the contextual factors that relate to your text, your arguments. For example, if all my arguments had to do with femininity, but my text also spoke about World War II, but all my arguments are only talking about femininity, it wouldn't make sense to introduce that the text was, or speak about how the text emerged after World War II and was inspired by World War II, okay? Has nothing to do with my argument. Only talk about context where it's relevant to your argument. You also want to signpost your paragraphs, and you also want to provide a synthesis statement with audience impact. Okay, so this is a sample introduction that talks about, or that basically does all these things, okay? We're not going to read it, but let's have a look at the question and the general elements that it follows from here. So the connections between texts create an ongoing cultural conversation that gives insight into truth. In your response, discuss how your pair of prescribed texts, so this is for Module A for English Advanced students in Year 12, they look at 2 texts together and compare them. Discuss how your pair of prescribed texts engage in this conversation to shape audiences' perspective. So we have the thesis, okay? Then we have the elaboration of the thesis. Then we're introducing the text and the context of the text. More context of, as I said, Sylvia Plath, and then the other text that you'll look at if you do Sylvia Plath is Ted Hughes, and more context. And then audience effect, okay? You can see audiences may observe the multiplicity. There we see audience effect, okay? Yes. All right, so your thesis is your response to the question and your personal thesis, aka that through line that I keep talking about. Okay, so your body paragraph It should be based on themes. It should contain around 3 to 4 quotes. Again, I've put it there to satisfy everyone. The quotes can and should include form. Each quote should introduce a new idea about the topic sentence, and you must discuss context and purpose at the same time. So we're not going to go through this structure but you can kind of, it's generally everything we've kind of spoken about so far. Obviously, in one paragraph, you don't need to hit values, purpose, context, and reception, audience reception for every quote and form analyzed, but you should at least aim to do one for every piece of evidence, okay? Without those aspects, the text has no deeper meaning. Yeah, so I don't need you to tell me what the context is in every piece of evidence. Maybe introduce like general context that relates to your argument, and then break down more specific parts of context for each quote as it relates to them. Okay, so you need a topic sentence that builds a pathway to discuss specific ideas or themes from your text. You need detailed textual evidence, including 3 to 4 quotes. Your analysis must answer these 3 questions, okay? What is the author doing? Why are they doing it? How does this change how the audience thinks and behaves? And each piece of evidence should expand on the points made by the previous quote. You should also talk about form and context, as we've said, and succinctly summarize author's purpose, okay? This is kind of covering stuff that we've already mentioned. And then for your conclusion, this is kind of what you want to follow. You want it to be short and sweet, okay? It should really only be around 4 sentences. You want to succinctly reiterate your thesis. That's kind of the main idea, and recap what each paragraph, how it proved your thesis, how each body paragraph proved your thesis. And you have to get one to get a band 6 in the HSC. Again, I know everyone's probably thinking, oh, but Chloe Lee, we're not in the HSC yet. But as I said, we're going to be there though. So we want to propel you guys into that. Okay, personal voice, as we said, these are everything that we want to have for a personal voice. Okay, so for a personal voice, as we know, we need to have an opinion. We're not going to go through all of this just for the interest of time, but we've also went into personal voice in great depth together anyway, so that's fine. You also want to experiment with structure. Biggest thing I'll say here, switch up your peel structure. Okay, as I said, we don't want it to be blocky. We also want to start playing with our vocabulary. Now, please don't take that as going to synonyms.com and every single word you use taking a synonym. No, we don't want that. We want you to use words that you understand. If you do want to use a new word, make sure you understand it and can use it in an essay. Okay. All right. You also want to have clear and clever expression. Okay. So, that kind of relates to this idea of having a more sophisticated vocabulary. All right. So